us now, Democratic representative from Pennsylvania, who's also a member of the Armed Services Committee and the highest-ranking former military officer ever elected to Congress, Congressman Joe Sestak. Thank you so much, Congressman, for being with us. Bob Woodward had brought up before the military cuts that the Republican Secretary of Defense is proposing. Do you support those cuts?
I think that this change in funding by the Mr. Secretary of Defense is absolutely something that will improve our military for two major reasons. He's actually going to terminate or suspend those types of platforms, those instruments of war that were intended primarily for the Cold War. And second, he's moving the funding over into what is absolutely critical. That is the capability to know where the adversary is. Take the F-22. 187 of them. There's only one scenario when you look out there in the Western Pacific that we would need this all-aspect stealth fighter for. Then you stop and you say, how many do you need? You probably need less than 187. Then you say, let's move that funding into an unmanned air vehicle, as the Secretary has said, that could have been out there in the Gulf of Aden over this past year, loitering 24 hours, looking down, and seeing hundreds of square miles where a pirate might have boarded a ship, like happened yesterday, and been able to relay it to a helicopter or to a naval vessel elsewhere. This transformation is something Mr. Rumsfeld, actually, when I was in the Navy, heading the defense review under him, wanted to move us towards. We're finally getting there.
Bob Woodward.
Congressman, how about the Navy? Because Gates has proposed cutting these exotic new destroyers that cost, what, $1.5 billion each? Do you agree with that?
Yes, this DDG 1000, actually the first three of them will cost $5 billion apiece. What he's now going to do is procure...
$5 billion apiece?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
The initial cost of them 5 years was $1.2 billion. Now, what we're going to move to is procuring more DDG 51s. Why? If you noticed, he said 6 of them are going to have software upgrades to handle ballistic missile defense. We already have about 15 out there to do that. Why? Two primary reasons. Again, in the Western Pacific, and I sat down with the CIA to confirm, there is now the potential near-term capability that the DDG 1000 could not address to have a ballistic missile aimed towards an aircraft carrier. So we're now going to have upwards of 80, because we already have about 75 of them of DDGs 51s upgraded to handle it. Second is what we can now do is place these ballistic missile defense ships wide around the world, including in the Eastern Mediterranean, to handle a rogue threat from Iran if that were to happen. We can actually have a pretty seminal capability of doing that today. What he said is sit back, look at the whole force. Do I have a sunk investment in Aegis cruisers, ships that are already out there, that I can enhance a bit rather than spending $5 billion per a new platform? What a nice change.
Yeah, Pat Buchanan.
Congressman, what do you anticipate up on Capitol Hill where this is going to affect an awful lot of... Well, thanks. You got the answer?
Yeah, you got the answer.
What do you expect in terms of reaction, Democrat and Republican? Because there's an enormous number of districts. They spread all the contracts around, and there's a lot of rice bowls that are going to be broken.
That's the problem. Let's be upfront about it. People tend to go to the Armed Services Committees because they have districts that happen to have defense industries in them. One of them is going to affect my district, CSAR, the Combat Search and Rescue Platform for the future to go in and get a downed airman such as O'Grady, remember, during the Bosnia conflict. But what he said is, I don't want to purchase a single service, Air Force only platform. Let's sit back and get a multi-service capability to do it. That's the right thing to do, and I'm going to support that. However, I know, and you've already heard, that whether it's the F-22 or whether the C-17, this is where the fight will be. Industry and the House Armed Services Committee, and on the Senate side, and appropriations, is the fight's going to be tough, tough battle. And it's a shame. If there's a transformation needed, it's now.
You know, Mike Barnicle, when I got on the Armed Services Committee at 31, I noticed it was different from the other committees. Judiciary, Republicans and Democrats would stand up and shoot at each other. You knew that was going to happen. every day. On the House Armed Services Committee, there was crossfire, and after a couple weeks, I'd say, what the hell is going on here? They'd say, that's the representative from Boeing, that's the representative from Lockheed Martin, and so the congressman's right. This is, it is not partisan, it is bipartisan in terms of everybody on that committee wanting to protect their home turf.
The highest-ranking general on the Armed Services Committee, Joe, is often General Dynamics, as a lot of congressional districts know. But, you know, I'd like to ask the Admiral, and I'm sticking with the higher title today, Congressman, what is the story on piracy? Yesterday, as we're now reading about today, this is 350 miles off the coast of Somalia, not exactly a congested waterway. The mechanics of this. How does this happen? How do 4 pirates in a small boat 350 miles off the coast of a country, a continent, sneak up on a big freighter?
You know, this is where you see out in the operational area, not just as Mr. Gates is trying to change in the procurement arena, that culture in how we operate is difficult to change. We have had in the Persian Gulf about 10 to a dozen ships. We have off of Somalia about 4. Wait a moment. Why are we mal-deployed when we don't need anti-submarine hunting ships in the Persian Gulf? We should be having them over off Somalia. We haven't redeployed to where the real concerns are day in and day out. Let me give you the example. We don't have, and the Navy's just beginning to test it, that unmanned air vehicle that I had spoken about that could be up there, a predator, a global hawk that loiters and looks down and links down to a naval ship in order to intercept it. The real change that has to be brought about, and this is what Mr. Gates is doing, is stop measuring our military in how many ships, how many aircraft, how many brigades. Start measuring it in capability to know where an adversary might be. Imagine if we had known that Saddam Hussein was about to go into Kuwait, because we could have looked down in that country and seen it. We might not be in this conundrum you talked about earlier today. That's the type of change of acquisition and redeployment and how we move our assets more readily that we have to get about based on a knowledge-based capability.
Just to make a point in history, we actually did know that Saddam Hussein was about to go in Kuwait. And we had all of these satellite photos, and within the Pentagon and the administration of Bush 1, they couldn't quite believe it.
All right. Thank you, Congressman. Admiral, greatly appreciate you being with us. But, Bob, go ahead and finish your point.